maybe introduce yourself. This will be posted on YouTube, and if you'd like me to screen share, I can make you the host. But thank you so much for being here. We're grateful for you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I won't worry about screen sharing because I mostly just wanted you guys to be able to see my face and to be able to see all of your wonderful faces. So this is great. I actually thought it was really cool that you had Mr. Hunsaker on here to talk to you guys at first. Funny story, I grew up like down the street from him. And so I know him kind of in a more intimate way, which is cool. And I'm sad that I missed what he was sharing with you guys, but I'm grateful, Olivia, for your guys' flexibility and letting me just kind of jump in here in the middle of my workday. So I'm a therapist here in Cache Valley. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm working for Cache Valley Counseling. And so right now we just have one central location kind of in the middle of the valley here in Providence. And I love therapy. I really do love what I do. I feel very fortunate to be in a field that I'm very passionate about and I'm able to get a lot of joy from. I specialize in couples therapy and in trauma therapy specifically. And then obviously I work with a lot of other clientele ranging from anxiety to depression stuff to, self-esteem or eating disorders or things like that. And like I said, love what I do. And so I'm really happy to be here with you all today talking to you about stress and a little bit more of how we can recognize stress in ourselves and how we can manage it. And so during this, I have like my Zoom thing open and available. So like if any of you have any questions for me, like feel free to just shoot it in the chat and I'd be happy to address any of those things kind of on the fly as we're going through this. But otherwise, Olivia, I have until when are we going to end?
We were shooting to end by like 3:45, 3:50.
Okay, perfect. I can totally work on that then.
Perfect.
So the first thing that I want to highlight is that there is a definite link between anxiety and stress. In fact, in my opinion and in my world, anxiety and stress are the same thing, just with a different label in a lot of ways. And so knowing that is important because we all experience stress, right? But for some reason in our world and in our society, anxiety gets a bad rap, right? It's something that gets labeled as a super negative thing, or as a thing that like if you experience too much of it, you're like in some way flawed, maybe. Which I think it's important to take the stigma out of that. That we all experience anxiety, right? We can all agree on that, okay? But we're going to each experience different levels of anxiety or stress in our lives. And so what they both do, though, is they take us out of the present. So let me give you like maybe a not so common example, and then we can talk about a more common example and we can see how these are linked. So if I'm walking or hiking in the mountains somewhere and I come across a bear on my path, I'm going to immediately have a stress response, right? So you may have heard of like the fight, flight, or freeze response, where I'm either going to try to fight that bear off, I'm going to try to run away, or I'm going to freeze, pretend like I'm dead, and hopefully it just like sniffs me and walks away, right? Any of those things could potentially get me out of that immediate danger or out of that immediate threat. But we have to remember they're automatic, and that's very good. If you had to think in that moment, like, oh crap, there's this bear in front of me, what do I do? That could cost you your life. And so you being able to just act very quickly is important. The way your body does that is it sends a signal, your brain sends a signal to the rest of your body to immediately activate different parts of your body. So for example, and these are just kind of some general things, you might notice that your heart rate increases. That's very important because your body has to get blood to the extremities, such as your arms and your legs, so that you can either fight that thing or run away. You're also going to have an increase in your breathing. So you're going to start breathing faster and shallower. And that again helps with that blood movement, puts more oxygen into the blood, which also kind of helps your body to thicken the blood, which if you get wounded means that your blood is more likely to clot and the wounds you're not going to bleed to death maybe as easily. And so these are things that the body does just again, automatically to keep us alive. Now, because on your daily life, you're probably not going to run across very many bears, and I at least hope that's the case for you. you're going to have this type of stress response in different scenarios, right? So maybe it's like in a public speaking thing, whether that's in like a class that you're in or like a community group that you're a part of. Maybe you feel anxiety taking a test, or maybe you have that same type of stress response getting together with a group of friends. Well, even though it's not a bear, your body still perceives that stress and it responds in the same way. So, you know, if you were to kind of hook up two people to an fMRI scanner, which looks at your brain activity as it's happening, you would see a pretty similar process with the person who's presented with a bear in front of them and a person who's experiencing a significant stress response to something like a test at school. So you're going to be doing the same thing, right? But there's not this big bear in front of you. But again, because that response is so similar, let's take the stigma out of that, because this is just your body trying to get by and to survive this, right? So at this point, what do we do with it? So we're having this response, but what do we actually do about it? Now, in my work, one of the first things I like to work with people on is identifying and recognizing what you feel when you're stressed. So bringing some awareness to it, right? So noticing some of those physical signs that your body gives you to say that there's something negative going on for me. So like for me, for example, when I'm really stressed, I feel it in my gut, like immediately. For me, it's kind of like a dropping sensation, you know, kind of like when you're going really fast over a hill and you like jump a little bit, that kind of feeling. And if I don't do anything about it, what I notice is that my shoulders will be like up in my ears. And I have to like consciously relax my shoulders to be able to calm down or to be able to relax, because that's how stress impacts my body. And so as you think about, excuse me, how you experience stress, try to identify some of those physical signs that your body gives you, because you can only do something about it after you recognize that it's happening in the first place, right? Sometimes it's helpful too to identify those various triggers that kind of bring some of that stress for you. So like in my previous examples, maybe you get really stressed around like finals week, or maybe you get really stressed around a particular test or midterms or doing a presentation, any of that stuff. Because again, then you can prepare for it in maybe a different way. So after you've been able to identify those things and recognize when you're feeling this stress, then I like to talk about how do we gauge what response is necessary, because not every situation needs like the same type of response. And so I like to think of a scale of 0 to 10. And so 0 being like very little, if any, stress, and 10 being the most stress you can imagine. Now you decide what that is for you, but 0 to 10. And then let's divide it in half. So right in the middle where the 5 is, and anything that's below the 5 is going to do something that you're going to want to do something that I call in the moment coping. So it's stuff that you can do right then and there to work through that stress. If it's higher than a 5 though, that's where you want to do a get out of there type of coping, as I like to call it. So let me break each of those down real quick for you guys. So in the moment coping is going to be doing things like maybe sitting on your own for 5 minutes and just doing some breathing, right? Maybe allowing yourself to go to like your happy place, right? Or go to the safe place that you can imagine. You can also do things that you know just work for you. And so maybe music is something that's really calming for you. Maybe getting out and going on a walk or something can be really helpful for you. So finding that kind of good rhythm of something that you can do in the moment to deal with that stress that you're feeling. Now, on the other hand, though, get out of there coping is something that you want to do when it's a higher level of stress, okay? And the reason why I say get out of there, which I mean, literally, I just want you to get yourself up and leave, is because if you stay in that place where the stress is actively happening and it's more of that intense kind of side of the scale, you're just going to get stuck because your body is going to be in that fight, flight, or freeze place. And you can't think clearly in that place. Like my example with the bear, right? if I'm sitting in front of that bear, I'm not going to be able to think about this problem that I'm on. I'm not going to be able to think about what I need to do to get out of there. I'm just acting, I'm reacting, right? And so I like to do something that's called a flagpole exercise, which is basically just you identify a specific thing you can do every time or nearly every time to get out of that high stress place. So for example, when I was in grad school, I would do grad school is awesome, but it's hard, right? And I remember doing homework sometimes for like 4 or 5+ hours straight, just trying to kind of get through things. And I would notice that my stress kind of at like the 3-hour mark would start to peak, to the point where if I kept going, I was just going to spend the next 2 hours, like honestly, maybe just like staring at a page, right? Just because I was just not in a place to be able to continue working. And so my flagpole exercise was always, I would get up, I would go out of the building I was in, whether that was I was at home or I was out on campus, and I would just walk around for 5 minutes. I would set a timer on my phone and just walk one direction. I wouldn't think about where I was going. I would just walk and try to just enjoy being outside and walking around. And then I would go back. That process of getting myself out of there brought me from a high level of stress, feeling this distress, to back to more of like a baseline kind of place. And so getting out of there coping isn't avoiding the issue. It's actually being mindful of what your limits are, getting yourself out of there, and then from there, applying any other coping skills that you have from there to get yourself like from that 5-ish level down to a lower level. Because the goal is you want to get back, right? We don't want our stress to control us. And so we need to do these things so that we can get back into it. And so those are the things that I would recommend and the things that I kind of prepared to talk to you about today. So I know that was kind of super brief, but that was kind of the time frame that you gave me, Olivia. So if anyone has any questions, now would be a good time, or if we need to wrap up, that's totally cool too.
I think something that I really liked about what you were saying that I could empathize with was when you spoke about like almost dehumanizing ourselves for feeling stress when there was something we deemed insignificant or not like worthy of our stress, but yet it still was. I could also empathize with having the feeling of like when you're in that super high stress situation where your body just has those crazy responses and you can't even think straight. And if you stay in there for too long, it really is detrimental. And so I don't know, I really did empathize with all those things you said. And so my question is, like when we are in that cycle, kind of dehumanizing ourselves to the things we get stressed out at, is there any advice you could give on helping us to avoid those thinking tendencies, or maybe to have a different practice for when we do feel like that? I don't know. That's kind of my question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So the first thing that I would say is to kind of write it out. And so what I mean by that is when you experience any negative thought or even a negative emotion, typically it only stays in your head or in your body for a few moments. It's when we focus on it that it gets kind of stuck, right? And so being able to just tell ourselves something as simple as like, oh, like I'm feeling this way right now, or I'm having that thought that like I'm pathetic for feeling this way or for reacting this way. Just being able to point that out and be like, oh, like that's what I'm feeling right now, and telling yourself it's okay, I'm going to accept that for what it is without trying to like figure it out or fix it right then in the moment, can help a lot, because your body will naturally work through that on its own. And so what I would add to that, though, in addition to kind of writing it out, is to get in the habit of practicing empathy for yourself, because it's easier for us a lot of times to be like empathetic to other people, right? To be like, oh man, that really sucks that you experienced that, or like I can really feel you where you're coming from there. But sometimes we have a hard time empathizing with our own experience because we do tend to beat ourselves up, or we do tend to be really hard on ourselves. And so being able to just kind of repeat, maybe even like a few positive statements about yourself in that moment of like, okay, like I'm human and that's why I'm feeling this. It's okay, I've got this. Like, I really am a great person, whatever that statement is for you. And I would encourage you to kind of find that good fit for you. But that's what I would recommend.
Awesome. Spencer, thank you so much for coming. We're super grateful for you for answering our questions and for providing some real life steps that we can do. I started going on walks too, actually. It's helped me a lot. So I'm grateful for that. I think that's an awesome idea. I would totally recommend it. It helps a ton. But we're super grateful for you and for your willingness to share some thoughts. And this will be posted on YouTube later. So we just invite anyone, if you have friends that are struggling or don't really know how these practices, then just share a link with them. But we're grateful for you and your willingness to speak. So we'll see you later.
Thank you so much. It was great to be with you guys.
Thank you. Bye.